I'm super excited to be joined by two wonderful guests who co-authored the recent book, Science Under Siege, How to Combat the 5 Most Powerful Forces That Threaten Our World, that being Peter Hotez, a PhD who has done extensive work in vaccines, and Michael Mann, a PhD who does a lot of work regarding climate change. I want to thank you both first for taking a moment to speak with us in the channel today.
Thank you, Brandon. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, wonderful to be with you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
by the way, I'm also a pediatrician too. So
Yep, I'm sure the accolades are endless. I could do a 30-minute segment just on the titles.
no, but in case we talk about vaccines, there you go.
Makes sense. Yeah, but the pleasure's all ours. I do want to start before getting into, I know the book talks about the 5 Ps that you guys think are the key threats. I want to ask about something that I've found to be frustratingly more common. I'm sure you guys have experienced it as well. And the best way I could describe it is this kind of thinking that critical thinking is like more akin to blind skepticism. And even with that skepticism is kind of just questioning any authority rather than going through like a real scientific method or empiricism and that kind of thing. I'm curious how you think that, and you guys could both weigh in on this, how we better get across to people to differentiate the sort of questioning that is needed in science to further science from this sort of like conspiratorial incredulity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take a stab, and I know Peter has thoughts as well. And it's something we talk about in the book. You know, skepticism in science is an important thing. It's important to question a finding, to make sure it's supported by the evidence, to follow the evidence where it leads you. And so it's part of the self-correcting machinery of science that Carl Sagan spoke so eloquently about years ago. And what's happened, what we see too often, is contrarianism or denial dressed up as skepticism, rejecting the overwhelming consensus based on the most convincing evidence and findings that have been validated many times over, questioning that for ideological or political reasons. That's not skepticism. That's a type of one-sided skepticism that has no place in legitimate scientific discourse. And too often, those who would brandish themselves as skeptics are nothing of the sort, because they are willing to reject overwhelming scientific evidence based on the flimsiest of arguments that don't hold up to the slightest bit of scrutiny. That's not skepticism. That's denialism.
Yeah, I think you said it really well, Mike. And if I could just add one thing, Brandon, what's really interesting is, when you take the time to listen to some of these conspiracy podcasts, how they gaslight you, and they tell the viewers that they're teaching them critical thinking, or you're not a critical thinker unless you go down the rabbit hole with them of these conspiracies. And what I've noticed, whether it's on social media or in conversations with someone, I'll run to the airport, when someone at the start says, "I'm a critical thinker," quote unquote, I head for the hills, because they're anything but. And so when someone has to tell you they're a critical thinker, that's a red flag, because it's a part of the gaslighting that the conspiracy podcasts do.
I think it's kind of akin to when people say, do your own research, when you're like showing them actual research, and their research is like Facebook memes or something.
So they go to the University of Google, as Jenny McCarthy infamously once said, right?
Yeah, Google, but pass over anything that disagrees with you, surely. I in the book, obviously, then you guys discuss kind of the 5 Ps that you see as the key threats to this kind of siege that science is under. I wasn't sure, I guess, who was the better one to ask, maybe to briefly lay these out. But then if both of you, I didn't know if maybe in your respective fields, if there was one you thought was a unique danger or something like that.
Well, I think we each, one of the things that was really exciting about the book is that we each came at it from our own point of view based on the science that we do and what we've encountered. But what I thought was most rewarding about the book was our efforts to sort of bring it together so that there's a coherent narrative. And we draw on examples on both, with both climate and COVID-19 and vaccines. But in the end, we try to integrate it into sort of a larger message. And so each of us sort of really waded in fully with respect to each of these components, each of the chapters. I'm happy to start off. I mean, we start off with the plutocrats, and these are the Elon Musks and the Koch brothers and Rupert Murdoch. These are the folks who, for ideological or political reasons, These are billionaires who have decided to use their great wealth and influence to sort of enforce their own ideological views of the world. And often those views are anti-scientific, either because they have a fossil fuel profit motive, or they buy into sort of health freedom, conspiracy theories, anti-vax theories. But in the end, there are a relatively small number of individuals, we can count them on the fingers of our hands, who have bought the social media companies, who fund the media empires, or who lavishly fund front groups and think tanks and what we call astroturf organizations that are really funded by bad actors, billionaire plutocrats, but pretend to be grassroots. They are the funders to a large extent of this anti-science machine, this Leviathan that we talk about.
Yeah, just to comment on the plutocrats section, we talk a bit about Elon Musk, who, for both of us, a very fascinating individual in the sense that, he has done important things in terms of creating science-driven companies or accelerating science-driven companies. I mean, look at Tesla, right? Or SpaceX
And clean energy.
or
Yeah.
Neuralink, right? I mean, and so we're sort of aghast or astonished at how he sort of undermined his own efforts and this kind of self-defeating, turning Twitter into X to push this whole anti-science narrative against climate change, or claiming that the virus was man-made, or that vaccines are dangerous, and to bring back all the anti-science conspiracy guys who were so dangerous and caused so many people to make bad health decisions during the pandemic and ultimately losing their lives. We estimate 200,000 Americans died because they refused COVID vaccines during the pandemic. And for them to bring it all that back is profoundly disappointing and self-defeating. Or someone like the Koch brothers, who, were never really on my radar screen because they were sort of in Michael's world, right? Because they were, they were running an oil and gas private concern, the largest, and you can understand why they'd want to go push back against the climate crisis, or engage in climate denialism. But why would they go against something like a pandemic? And we realized they pushed this whole Great Barrington Declaration that said that you don't need to take COVID prevention measures, and part of it was to avoid a shutdown in the economy, which would affect oil and gas prices.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, it's we were surprised at some of the linkages that we didn't really expect. That between the funders of sort of climate disinformation and the folks behind this sort of the conspiracy theories, the anti-vax conspiracy theories.
And then I guess connecting those to the kind of authoritarian nature of a lot of people who push these things, I'm kind of curious, what do you guys think drives that connection? Is it financial kind of incentive, or why do you think these people who typically are attacking science, it poses as an attack on democracy also, really?
Yeah, so that's sort of leading us into petrostates now. So we've gone from plutocrats. These are sort of the individuals, and many of them do subscribe to sort of authoritarian sort of ideologies. But the other part of it are these petrostates, state actors, countries that primarily derive their economy from resource extraction, and in particular fossil fuels, hence petrostate. And we know who the main actors are here: Saudi Arabia, Russia, who have opposed global climate action. Their primary asset is their fossil fuels. They've done everything they can to keep the rest of the world addicted to their fossil fuels, and that includes blocking global agreements to deal with climate change. It includes flooding social media with bots and troll armies to try to promote climate disinformation and misinformation. Typically, they're authoritarian in nature, so there's sort of a correspondence between petrostates and authoritarian states. And we argue that today, under the current administration and a Congress that is enabling it, and a Supreme Court that is by and large a rubber stamp now for the policies of this administration, we have to consider the United States as a petrostate as well.
Yeah, and what's interesting is you might say, well, you understand why petrostates would attack climate science, but why vaccines and things like that? And And, to understand it, we actually go back in history. We look at we look at Stalinist Russia during the 1930s and 1940s when they threw the Mendelian geneticist Vavilov, one of the top geneticists in the world at that time, Nikolai Vavilov, into the Gulag, where he ultimately perished by starvation and exposure in a Gulag prison hospital in favor of pseudoscience. And they promoted the career of someone with no scientific training named Trofim Lysenko, who had this idea that you'll soak the Russian wheat crop in snow and then subsequently that will toughen up the wheat. It's total nonsense. But so why would he do that? Well, it's a form of authoritarian control to attack the intelligentsia and keep the scientists and the intelligentsia down. And unfortunately, that's what's been happening now with with some extremist elements within our U.S. government. Of course, we're seeing this play out now in the Department of Health and Human Services. I mean, Mr. Kennedy is a modern day Lysenko, pushing all of these pseudoscience conspiracies and pseudoscience tenets around vaccines causing autism and everything else we've been hearing about the news. What's the motivation there? It is a form of authoritarian control. And again, very self-defeating, since we're a nation built on the strength of our research universities and institutions.
And Brandon, it's worth mentioning, because we talked a little bit about this before we started the conversation. Peter and I started writing this book a year and a half ago, well before Trump was elected to a second term. And so we had no idea how much the message of the book would resonate with what's now taking place, what's happening, what's unfolding literally in real time. And it's disconcerting. I can say that I wish the book was less relevant than it unfortunately now is.